The Douglas Coleman Show is made possible with support from Seth David Radwell, a recent guest on the program and author of American Schism, How the Two Enlightenments Hold the Secret to Healing Our Nation, released this past July. As Publishers Weekly writes in its recent glowing book life review of American Schism, business executive Radwell's epic debut examines the historical influences that have led to what he sees as the collapse of politics in the United States. Seth Radwell makes the case that the current chasm between the American right and left can be traced back to the 18th century's Age of Enlightenment and the basic tenets of liberty, equality, and reason. American Schism provides a historical perspective that can help us fight today's unreason with reason and bridge current-day divides. American Schism by Seth David Radwell is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold. For more information, go to americanschismbook.com.
It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life. From the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, or welcome back to the Douglas Coleman Show, Ann Charles. Hi, Ann. How are you? Welcome back.
Hi, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, my pleasure. Do you remember how long ago it was that you were on? Because I can't remember.
Oh, boy. Come on. No, I'm trying to think. I know it was last year. That's all I know.
Like 8-9 months, something like that, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And we talked a bit about your career, I think, and all of the books you've written. How many have you written now in total?
I always have to recount. It's like, why can't I remember that number? I'm pretty sure it's 32, including the ones co-written with my husband, and there are 4 of those currently.
So how many years did it take you to do 32 books?
Oh, well, the first one published in January 2011, but I had written approximately, I'm counting on my fingers, glad nobody can see me counting like that. I think I'd written 4 or 5 before I published the first one. So it really started in the mid-90s when I wrote the first book I'd ever written by hand on a notepad, and then typed it up. And it was horrible, but I finished it and sent it off to an editor or a publisher and was rejected for good reason, but they were really nice about it. So started way back then and then really got serious in the early to mid 2000s.
Okay. So I've always contended that writing is as much of a craft and a skill as it is a kind of creative talent that people could be born with. Because I think it's two different sections, if you will. The right. First part is the sort of story that comes into your head out of the ether from nothing. And then the right. second part is actually putting it together in a way that's interesting. And that is basically the choice of words you use to tell your story. And I think
right.
that is the craft end of it. I think people get better. And as you just said, when you did your first story, it was bad, but you got better, obviously, right? With practice.
Yes. Well, my goal is every book to continue to improve the craft and make the stories that come. And, it may be small things that a reader may not notice as much as I can pick up from their feedback, but I am constantly working at studying other books, studying other movies, and learning how to craft a story in a way that's even more of what I want, rather than the fire hose that's just going everywhere, and you're just holding on barely, to knowing where you want to actually aim the spray and doing the job right.
Now, I'm no expert about various authors' styles. I guess I probably don't read enough to really start to make that distinction, with the exception of the ones that are so obviously on one end or the other, like Edgar Allan Poe on one side and Ernest Hemingway on the other side. Okay,
right.
Just ones that are that blatantly different. But people like, I don't know, I've had David Baldacci on here twice. I've read some of his books, and I couldn't say, oh, well, David's style is like, or this other author's is like David's style, because I don't know exactly what David's style is. I mean,
right.
I like his books. I love his stories, but to put a marker on the style, see, I'm a musician, and for me, music, I could do that all day. But for writing, I don't know. So are you able to do that? I mean, does your brain work in the sense that you can read something and say, and kind of figure out where they came from in terms of who they might have read previous to writing their story? Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. And I had all these literature classes in college to get that degree in creative writing that my teachers would want me to say, oh, yes, I can pick this out and this out, and figure out who influenced them. But really, partly because the types of stories I read a lot of genre fiction. And so, and I can see, if somebody's trying to emulate, let's say, Janet Ivanovich, then you can maybe see where they're trying, to make it funny in the same way maybe her Stephanie Plum series is funny. But for most authors, I think once they hit their stride, they have their own voice, that magic word, quote, voice. And I think that really starts to shine to where I can pick up some authors that I love and start reading and say, oh, yeah, this is definitely this author. I can just tell by word choice, the way they use humor, the way they do certain things. Just, like you can tell on some movies, maybe who directed it, if you're really good at movies, and you're really schooled in watching different movies. But for the most part, it's hard, I think, because there's most of us get our creative background from things we watched over the years or read, and then it's, the combination of all that. So, if you were only allowed to read, let's say, Zane Grey or, Stephen King growing up, then you're probably going to sound like them a little bit.
Well, that's a good point. Obviously, the more input you get into your brain blender,
yes.
the different sort of flavors are going to come out. Well, I guess it is similar to, I'm trying to make a comparison here between songwriting, which I know a lot about, and novel writing, which I know little to nothing about. It is similar, though, in the sense that when you're a kid growing up, you listen to everything that was on the radio, all of your favorite music artists, you bought their records. And if you were going in that direction, you would just listen to absolutely everything you could get your hands on. And gradually, when you started to write, initially people would say, oh, it sounds just like... when I first started writing songs, people were like, oh, are you and Elton John brothers? Because people would, people would say that it sounded exactly like an Elton John song, which on the one hand was nice, but on the other hand, obviously you couldn't make a career out of that unless you wanted to be a Elton John impersonator.
Right.
So as time went on, now I don't get that at all. Now people say things like, geez, I don't know who that sounds like, which is really the best compliment that you could get.
Right. Right.
Now do you get that with your writing, or do people compare you?
Sometimes I'm compared, sometimes to authors I've never heard of before, and that's not because...
That's interesting.
That's because once I became a full-time writer, I lost hours and hours and hours of reading time every, week, month, whatever. I can't read like I used to read because I don't have the time, because I'm continually needing to write. So my reading all the stuff I used to read, it has shrunk to authors that I'm familiar with and I love. And so I know when I go to them, I'm going to get the results I want, out of a story. The feel-good thing or the scare, that kind of a thing. So I have had other author or readers tell me I can pick up a book and I can read and I can tell it's you. I can tell your voice, which is a wonderful compliment. That it's not I picked you up and you sounded just like so and so. I started reading and I could tell right away this was you. It's similar, I'm sure, in music after a while, that they just know this is the sound you're going to do. This is, your type of lyrics, your type of thing. And frankly, I'm amazed at songwriting and musicians, because I think, how the heck do you come up with some new song and a new riff, something that's never been done? It's amazing.
Well, there is a craft to that side of it. There are only a certain number of notes on the piano. Mm-hmm. And I suppose we could make the comparison to writing. I mean, how many words are there in the English language?
Right, and how many ways can you combine? And then I've heard things where there's like 18 set story tropes, I think it is, or there's 18 different storylines that people take and then constantly change and mix. But there's like a certain number, and that's all. And I think, how can there be a certain number? But maybe that's true. Maybe we all use the same thing and just change it up a bit.
I think so. I mean, I think we're going to run out of words at some point, and combinations, and same with notes. Now, if you want to go back a couple hundred years, when people like Mozart and Schubert and the great classical musicians were writing these incredible masterpieces with nothing more than a piano and a quill pen. Mm-hmm. And then you fast forward to today, where you've got technology that literally can do that without much human input. All you really have to do is be a good computer geek, and you can put together the same kind of sounds. Now, it may not have the emotional feeling to it. In fact, it doesn't have the emotional feeling, because computers are unable to inject that into the sound. And the sound comes out very sterilized and cold. But I would think that a computer could write every combination of chords, notes, phrases, timing, signatures, because music theory is all mathematics. Mm-hmm. And you would think that there would be a way that a computer could simply spit out every song that could ever be written. I fear that day is going to come, because then it's the game over. But I don't know. I suppose in the same way, there are computer programs I know that can write. Have you heard anything about that?
No. Well, I know you can speak into them. And I'm sure a computer could tell a pretty basic story. But I think and maybe it's this way with musicians, there's things that, for example, I do. And I'll use me because I know me better, and I can insult me without getting upset about it. So I know that one of the things I've always done since I was a kid is I mix up my metaphors. Meaning one of them that jumps out is count your ducks lucky, which is not a saying, but I said it and we all laugh. This was years ago, and I've used that since. And I use that sometimes in writing for humor. Maybe it's not actually something said, but it's a way of comparing a situation to something, that comparison. And that's where I think the computers will fall short, because you have to be human to screw up like that, I would think.
Count your ducks lucky.
It was a funny moment. You better count your ducks lucky you did this. And then I just stopped, and the other person stopped, and then we burst out laughing because I realized that's not how that goes. Well, but we liked it.
It's clever.
It was fun.
Yeah, and anybody knows what it means.
Right. You know what I'm saying. And so
I know what you're saying.
There are many things like that I tend to do in story. I write humor, so it works really well. That it's not, 100% this is how the saying goes. Because I write humor, I can throw things like that in it. And so I think that a computer could do a lot of things, but I think there's a human touch to many things, such as writing, and I would imagine songwriting and other things that they can't touch. I heard someone say their kid liked, was it Stevie Nicks or Hart or something, and the person said, yes, that's when singers used to actually sing when the music was on, and it wasn't all fake, put through something and their voices changed. These people can actually sing songs and have, the pipes to do it. So I think there'll be a category for, computers, and this is how they do it. But I still think, I would like to think that the human touch is still very important to many of us.
Let me go back to Count Your Ducks Lucky for a second, because I like that. It's clever. We all know what it means, even though it's not exactly what the phrase is, right?
Right.
It's actually a combination of a couple of phrases, isn't it?
It is.
Ducks in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the other? Count your lucky stars or something? Lucky
stars. And then, like people say, lucky duck, and things lucky like that. Duck. So it's a big mix up in my head, a mashup.
It's a sort of a poetic jumble.
Right.
But is it grammatically correct to be pedantic?
Count your ducks lucky. I've not really ever thought of it on the grammar. I think of it as a phrase.
Yeah, because I've read stuff that I absolutely loved and laughed through it. But if somebody was a grammatic purist, they would throw it in the trash because it was so poorly. The grammar was just way out of bounds. Now, my question is grammar locked in stone in terms of acceptable writing?
I think...
Or is that changing now?
It depends. Now, in dialogue, when a character is speaking, I think you can get away with all kinds of stuff, grammatically correct or not. And so if I had a character say, well, count your ducks lucky, you didn't get hailed today, then there's no problem with that, because most editors I've worked with, they're really hesitant to touch dialogue because they understand that what we say is not often grammatically correct.
Right.
And so you have liberty there. Now, if you're narrating, that's iffy. However, if you have a very colorful character that maybe speaks this way, then I think you'll get away with incorrect grammar when you're in their head, maybe just reading thoughts as well. But when you're reading, Anne picked up the coffee and ran out of the room, drinking it as she went, then I think you need to use correct grammar as much as possible. Unless you're trying to play with the pace of the story. And then when you're playing with pacing, you can get away with incomplete sentences as well.
There was that book that I read in junior high school called Flowers for Algernon. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of that book?
I have heard of it. I have managed, so far I haven't read it. And I don't mean that as a negative managed, because I've heard great things about it. But in all my literature classes, that has not been one that's been, on this is what you have to read this quarter or semester list. Okay,
well, I think it's geared towards 13-year-olds because it's about at that level. At least that's when I read it. And what was interesting about that book was that the whole premise of the book was this boy who starts out mentally challenged, I think is the PC term. And as he goes through the story, he gets smarter and smarter and smarter until he gets to like genius level, and then he falls back to where he started. And it's this whole process. So as you read through the story, because it's written from first person, it starts out like somebody texting, are you okay? Long before there was texting. And then as it goes on, the grammar gets better, it gets more sophisticated, more complicated words, blah, 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 blah. So you can do it that way to make an impression.
Right.
Because that was the sort of the whole point of the book, yeah.
And that's a wonderful vehicle to use rather than just saying, well, this character was, had a mental disorder or had this. And they're showing it right out of the gate and taking you through the process, which is really probably also why it's such a well-known story. But it's a really great way to show the character changing, the character growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without saying he kept getting smarter.
Right. From the first person perspective, it made it so much more interesting to read.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Douglas Coleman's Don't Do a Podcast is a dryly humorous rant about Douglas's pet peeve, the unrelenting torrent of podcasts hitting the web on a constant basis. As technology has put podcasting within the reach of anyone, many wholly unqualified people have taken the plunge. This witty polemic tries to persuade them from broadcasting their drivel using Douglas's brand of sarcastic humor. Now on Amazon, only 99 cents.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Are you an independent musician? How would you like to have your songs played on hundreds of radio stations just like the one you're listening to right now? Join MusicSubmit.com and we'll promote your music to radio stations and blogs in your genre. It's free to set up your account, and we guarantee your music will be considered for airplay by radio stations worldwide. Why not sign up today? It's free. MusicSubmit.com. Radio promotion for indie musicians.
Hey, this is Ray Powers. Don't touch anything. You've got it right where you need it. Tuned in to the Douglas Coleman Show. You heard me.
Right.
I remember I couldn't put it down as a kid. I read through it. And it wasn't that long. It was only 140 pages or something, paperback. So,
although it's for a junior high level kid, that's like an eternity. That's like, Hawaii, that big, huge volume of reading. At least that's what my kids, as they went through junior high, really, I've got to read 90 pages. And I'm like,
I think to be honest, the attention span of children has diminished substantially since I was in junior high school, because we weren't distracted with cell phones and internet. This was long before that.
Right. What did you have to do on a rainy day or something when you were stuck at home on a snow day from school? Play in the snow or
go outside.
Work around the house, or you could read, because TV had 3 channels? Yeah. That's for me. Yeah. So.
And in fact, I only had a little black and white TV in my room. In the living room, that we had the color TV, but Dad always hogged that. So
of course,
I could never watch what I wanted to watch.
Right. But no, I think, that's a point. It's first person as well. And, when I first started writing, I just wrote third person initially on my first few attempts because that's what the market was doing at the time in several books. It was always third person. So it was with time that I learned what a good challenge and fun challenge first person is, and how it makes a difference on a story, difference in story and telling the story when you can only look out through the eyes of one person versus being able to head hop, and But there's value in being multiple views too, as well. But that's where you talked about perfecting craft and continual learning. That's, over time, that all came to me as I kept working this craft and trying to get better and better.
Oh, I see. Yes. Okay. So you're able to expand the way you write, like you said, in first person or in third person, or right?
Right.
Okay. And combine them all if you want, right?
And combine them. Yeah. You start to learn, I think over time, you start to learn, oh, this is a tool that doesn't just hammer. You can also do delicate, detailed work with this tool as well. And you start to really, and I'm always learning still, so there's a lot for me to learn yet. But to continually try to learn how to use the tools in a new way or get better at it. When you have a scene where there's a big secret, and if your head going between different people's heads, you can tell it, we could be in the person's head who has the secret. And so as the reader, oh, here's the secret, who all's going to guess it. But if you're in a character and only one point of view, first person, and you do not know the secret, how do you get it out of the person? Visual clues, body language, all that kind of thing can play into it. So it's a lot of fun when I have stories in both first person and third, and it's a lot of fun to go back and forth and play with the different point of views.
I'm glad to hear you say that about constantly learning and challenging, because when people get to a level of success as you are as a writer, and I had the same conversation with David Baldacci, and so for his level of success as well, I said, if you put your name on the book, it's going to sell. So, and your publisher is going to take it very happily. So what is it that keeps you motivated to not just knock off another one? And he said, I have to do that myself at this point, because if I get to that point in my head where I think, I can just knock off another one and, they'll take it and everything's fine and I get my money. He said, I might as well go sell insurance, because the challenge is in writing something better and learning something. So it becomes a self-imposed discipline after a while, rather than trying to impress your readers or impress a publisher. Yeah? Would you agree?
Right. 100%.
Yeah.
The challenge is not just write another book in the series and get it out there. It's, what can I do different in this story? For example, I just released book 12 in the Deadwood series. How can I make book 12 different from 11, 9, 7? The humor, how can I advance the humor? How can I show character growth? How can I keep the story alive so it doesn't go flat and the readers get bored? And it's challenging book to book anyway. It's challenging with a series, and I have writers who say I couldn't write a series because that pressure, the constant keeping the whole big series going, the pressure of continuing to excel with each book, or I think I always say that I figure my readers will give me 2 screw ups. The first one, if I drop the ball, they'll go, it wasn't your best, but I'll still read the next. But if I screw up 2 times in a row, then I'm going to start losing them, and they're going to go, forget it. You're done. You're washed up, But so the challenge for me is always, when I start, how can I make this book better? How can I improve my craft? How can I make the story more exciting or more scary or whatever, funnier, whatever I'm working toward? What can I do to improve? What can I do to change it up so it doesn't feel like episodic? And how in the heck can I ever write another story, because I don't know how I wrote those last 5. So those are the thoughts that often go through my head. I'll read the previous one, because now I switch series. So I finished the Deadwood 12 story, and now I'm working in one of my other series, and I'm rereading all those previous books and getting back into that world. So I am now in this stage in this new in the other series that I'm currently working on, Jackrabbit Junction, where I think, how did I ever come up with this stuff? where did this humor come from? Oh my gosh, how am I going to be funny? How can I do this? I can't write like this. Who wrote this? And it's all these self-doubts that will just bury me for a while. And my husband, who he also writes, but he's been with me through this since the beginning, and he'll say, now if you remember, we do this for every book. We have to go through the self-doubt stage. And you have to just keep pushing on because it's in there, and move past your inner demons and just ignore them. So, there's all these things. I wish it was as simple for me as I'm just going to sit down and write a book again. But it's not that. It's a challenge. And maybe I make it a challenge. But I think it has to be a challenge, or like David said, I might as well be doing something else. And I always say, I could be working the window at McDonald's and seeing people and smiling and getting maybe free drinks. So why am I doing this? Oh, yeah, because there's a huge reward when it all comes out.
Well, I think the better writers, the better creators are the ones that have all the self-doubt, because that's kind of your own built-in gatekeeping mechanism. Like David said, I could just knock out another one and it would sell and it would make money, but I would feel crappy about it because I didn't really put in my all. And putting in your all means going through that self-doubt part. That's kind of the catalyst that gets you going, at least for me, for writing a song. Right. I could sit at a piano and write songs all day, but they'd be mediocre at best. But to find something that's cool, that's kind of sparks and go, oh, well, you haven't done that before, and then take that little piece and build on it. Then I may have something decent at that point.
Right.
Let me sort of segue into your book, which is probably why you're here in the first place. And then we do have to kind of wind it down. So the Deadwood series, you just said that there's 12 books, so the latest one is Never Say Sever in Deadwood. 12 books, is that a lot for a series, or is that typical?
Well, it used to be you write 3-book series because you got 3-book contracts way back when there weren't as many indie authors, and we went through publishers. And then it became 5. And then it sometimes grew out of control, into whatever number worked because the books were selling. So it's a lot, I think, especially when I go back to write the next Deadwood and I start over at the beginning reading and I try to go back through and get really into that world. I tend to leave plot threads throughout in different books that I may tie off somewhat at the end of one of the books, but then I'll pick that plot thread up 2 books later, and I'll tell you more about this particular thing, and we'll explore that more. So because of that, it's really important for me to go back and reread and really get fully back into that world and make notes as I read again to say, oh, remember you were going to do something with this. So it's a lot. It was a lot easier when I just had a couple or a few books in the series and I could quickly read and get writing. Now it's a lot of times a month of prepping and pre-reading to get ready to write. And I have a series arc for my books, and in the Deadwood world, we're after the first turning point, but not yet to midpoint in the whole series. So there's going to be a lot to read. I'm going to probably have to make cliff notes a little bit better in the future as I keep going. But as long as the readers are still engaged and on board, I'll keep pulling that story along the series arc.
Well, here's a good one. Can you give us a 1-minute synopsis of the Deadwood series?
A 1-minute synopsis of it. Sorry, I had to think that through. Sure. Violet Parker is a single mom. She's moved to Deadwood, starting a new career as a realtor, and she's trying to raise her 9-year-old twins in this new environment with this new job. But it turns out every other house in Deadwood is haunted, or, if it's not a ghost, it's something even worse. And in the first book of the series, there's a serial killer, and little girls are disappearing, and she's got a little girl that matches the descriptions of the others that have gone missing. So that's kind of the start of how it all gets rolling, and she has a nose for trouble, which is what always makes a great heroine or hero, and so they get involved and get right in there. And as the series grows, we have ghosts and other supernatural characters, as well as many humans with different abilities, sixth sense, if you will, as well as just normal people mixed in as well. So it's just a big combination of adventure and excitement and cringing and laughing and, all of that together.
So you said ghosts. Are there any other kind of supernatural beings in this?
Yes, the series, as it grows, the fun thing I did with this series is I don't start off where you jump right in and there's 10,000 other things there. You start off with ghosts, and you're kind of working your way in with villains and stuff. And so Violet's character grows as each book comes along, and she has things where she gets stronger and things where her eyes are opened more, and her physical abilities continue to, as she learns what she's capable of doing rather than just being, a screw-up single mom trying to make money. So it really is a supernatural mix with mystery, with a lot of humor and a lot of just adventure, action, some romance, everything thrown in there. Because mixed genre is what I love, and so mixed genre is what I write.
While you were describing the Deadwood series, Dark Shadows came to mind. The original TV show, not the movie. Mm-hmm. I'm friends with Catherine Lee Scott, who was one of the stars of the TV show. And I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but it was a soap opera that was done in the late 60s, early 70s that had vampires, ghosts, all kinds of witches, warlocks, and they did it seriously. It wasn't done campy, and it was truly a unique show. They did it live on television, and so it was done more like a theatrical play, half an hour, right. And they did it daily, which must have been an incredible amount of work. But, but I don't know, it just, for some reason, that just reminded me of it. Have you ever seen it?
No, I've heard of it. I was trying, as you were describing it, I'm going back through all the old, shows growing up that I've watched and over the years. But no, I'm going to go check it out.
Well, it's all, it was funny. I said, 12 sounds like a lot. They did like 1,800 something episodes.
Holy cow.
Of Dark Shadows. Yeah, and they just morphed into all kinds of stuff. Then they, in like season 5 or 6, they time traveled twice actually, and played multiple characters. Like, I think Catherine played her great grandmother or something in one of the time travels, and it's wild. The show is absolutely wild. But
well, if you think about the writing that went into that, that is so much work, and keeping it all straight. And keeping that's one of the things I have to do, is because I have a series and it's not individual shows, if you will, or books, I have to keep very detailed notes on all sorts of stuff, from plot lines to character descriptions to setting. It's constant. And so the details that must have went into the writing on that for that many shows. Wow.
Yeah, and I asked her, I said, so why did it quit, or why did you guys finish? And she said, we ran out of stuff. It was that simple. We're done. We finished everything. We've done everything we could possibly think of to do. And that's it. So
well, that was before they had all this computer graphics that could add in, little details to a show to maybe add more. They had to use what they had.
There was none of that. Yeah, there was absolutely none of that. And like I said, they did it live, I think, for most of the series. Maybe towards the end they were videotaping and, pre-recording the show. But I know it was, at least for the first few seasons, it was live. And, what's interesting is if you get the box set, the DVD box set, they left in all of the goofs, which I appreciated. And when I asked Catherine about it, she said, we wanted to do that because we wanted people to see that this was a live performance. And when you're a live actor, stuff goes wrong and you just have to carry on. We didn't have the luxury of editing when it was live. So you'd see things like dead bodies move and, people calling the character the wrong name. Just all kinds of stuff like that. People screwing up their lines, people having to cover other people's lines. But it makes it really interesting to watch. So.
Oh yeah, it takes it to. It's not so polished, but yet it's more real. It's even more fun that way.
Absolutely. We do have to wrap this up, unfortunately. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
I do. www.anncharles.com, and there's no E. It's just ANNCharles.com.
Great. And the new book is out or will be out?
It is out. It's an ebook. It's out in print, and the audio is being recorded as we speak and should be out this fall.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks so much for coming on. It was nice talking to you again. This was a nice conversation. Best of luck with the new book. Hope it does well.
Thank you so much, and good luck to you with songwriting and more, because really that's an amazing talent. And I love that there's always new songs and new, people always working to be creative and come out with new stuff.
I hope there's new songs, because musicians have been saying for the last 40 years that's it. There's nothing new. Everything's been done already. And somebody manages to come up with something that's totally different. So we'll see.
Well, same in the book world. It's all been done. But yet we have new stuff that you can put in, new ways, new humor styles, new things that are funny now that weren't 60 years ago or not funny anymore. So
exactly.
I think time allows us to continue to create and come up with different things.
Well, I hope so. That's encouraging. Well, on that note, we've got to wrap it up. Thanks again, Ann.
Thank you for having me.